You know that feeling, right? You spend hours, maybe even days studying something. You feel like you've totally nailed it. But then, a week later, it's just gone, vanished from your brain. It's got to be one of the most frustrating things ever. You put in all that effort and the knowledge just doesn't stick.
No, seriously, take a second. Think about that all-nighter, the coffee, the endless rereading of your notes. You felt like you knew it inside and out right before the test, and then, poof, a few days later, it's like it never even happened. If that sounds painfully familiar, you're definitely not alone. And it turns out there's a really good reason for it. Okay, let's get right into this because this is the absolute core of the problem. A ton of research from cognitive scientists, including a major study out of the University of Wisconsin, shows that the way we think we learn best is often the complete opposite of what actually works. Our own gut feelings are actively betraying us.
So, just how wrong are we? Well, let's look at this brilliant experiment that totally pulls back the curtain on our most common and most flawed learning instinct.
The setup here is pretty simple. A bunch of students were asked to learn the unique painting styles of two different artists, Pisani and Gerards. And the goal wasn't just to memorize the paintings they were shown, but to get good enough to identify new paintings by these artists later on. So the first group used a method that feels totally natural. It's what we all do. It's basically cramming. They studied in big focused blocks. First, they looked at a whole series of paintings by one artist, trying to get a solid feel for their style.
So they'd see a block of paintings that look something like this, all by Passiani. The idea is to just immerse yourself in that one style until you really get it. Makes sense, right? Seems logical.
And after they were done with Pisani, they moved on to a completely separate block of paintings, all by Duras. One artist, then the next. You know, simple, focused, massed practice. Now the second group, they did something that feels a little more, chaotic. Instead of studying in these nice, neat blocks, they used something called spaced or interleaved practice. They mixed everything up. Their study session looked more like this: a painting by Pisani, then right away a painting by Joris, then back to Pisani, then Joris again. They never really got to settle in and get comfortable with one artist's style for very long. So, what does your gut tell you? Who do you think did better, the focused crammers in Group 1 or the mixed-up studiers in Group 2? Who was actually better at identifying paintings they had never seen before? And the results are just crystal clear. It's not even close. The space group, the one that mixed up the artists, performed way better. And why? Well, by constantly switching, their brains were forced to work harder. They had to keep retrieving the patterns for each artist, spotting the differences, and that built a much stronger, more flexible understanding. It wasn't just memorizing. It was real, durable learning. Okay, so the data is in. Spacing and mixing things up works better. But this is where it gets really fascinating. The researchers went back and asked the students themselves what they thought worked best. And here it is. This chart brilliantly illustrates the whole problem. The overwhelming majority of students were convinced that massed practice, the cramming method, was more effective, even though their actual performance was way worse. See, cramming feels easier. It feels more fluent in the moment, and that creates what's called an illusion of knowing. We are just not good judges of our own learning.
And this gap between what feels good and what actually works goes much deeper than just our study habits. It gets at our core beliefs about ability itself, which brings us to another huge myth, the idea of fixed ability.
This all ties in perfectly with Carol Dweck's groundbreaking work on mindsets. It's pretty simple. If you have a fixed mindset, you believe your intelligence is like a rock. It's set in stone, so you avoid challenges because you don't want to look bad. But if you have a growth mindset, you believe your abilities can be developed, kind of like a muscle, so you see challenges not as threats, but as chances to grow. And this isn't just some feel-good platitude. Dweck's research shows this one belief directly predicts your success. It really changes everything.
So now that we've busted some of these huge myths, let's build ourselves a new toolkit, one that's actually based on what the science says works.
The big takeaway here is we need to trade our passive, easy habits for active, effortful ones. So stop just rereading and highlighting. It's not doing what you think it is. Instead, start using active retrieval. And that's just a fancy way of saying test yourself. Use flashcards or just close your eyes and try to pull the information out of your own head. And just like we saw in the art experiment, space out your practice and mix up or interleave different topics.
The core principle behind all of this is something cognitive scientists call desirable difficulties. It's such a great concept. It basically means that the things that make learning feel harder and slower in the short term are the very same things that build strong, long-lasting memories. The bottom line, if it feels too easy, you're probably not learning very effectively. Now, of course, to embrace these desirable difficulties, you need one thing that is incredibly hard to find in our world today: real, honest-to-goodness concentration. The ability to truly focus. It's like a superpower. The author Cal Newport gives us a really powerful way to think about this. He splits work into two types. You've got shallow work, that's checking emails, scrolling through your feed, bouncing between a dozen tabs. It makes you feel busy, but it doesn't build any real skill. Then you've got deep work. That's when you're totally free from distractions, concentrating and pushing your mind to its limits. That is where real learning and real progress happens.
Okay, these ideas are awesome, but how do we actually put them all together to learn something new, like starting right now? Well, there's a super simple, actionable plan for exactly that.
Author Josh Kaufman came up with this really elegant four-step process. First, break whatever skill you want to learn into its smallest possible pieces. Second, learn just enough so you can start practicing and notice your own mistakes. Don't get stuck in endless research. Third, get rid of anything that could distract you. Seriously, turn off your phone. And finally, commit to practicing the most critical parts of that skill. And what's the magic number? It's just 20 hours. We're not talking about the 10,000 hours to become a world-class master. We're talking about 20 hours of focused, strategic practice. That's about 45 minutes a day for a month. And it's enough to go from knowing absolutely nothing about something to being surprisingly good at it. It makes learning any new skill feel so incredibly achievable. So the science is really clear. Our intuitions about learning are often dead wrong. But the path to doing it right, it isn't actually that complicated. It's all about embracing a little effort, finding your focus, and practicing in a smart, strategic way. The only question left is, what do you want to learn first?